Your phone lights up. A friend asks if you can help them move this weekend. You're exhausted. You already have plans. You don't want to go. You stare at the message for a few seconds, already knowing the answer you want to give. No, but your fingers type something completely different. Yeah, sure. And almost immediately, you feel that strange combination of relief and regret. The conversation is easy now. They're happy. There's no awkwardness, no disappointment, no possibility that they'll think badly of you, except now you're the one who has to live with the answer. You didn't say yes because you wanted to. You said yes because somehow saying no felt worse. And that creates a much more interesting question. Why can refusing another person sometimes feel more uncomfortable than agreeing to something you genuinely don't want to do? It happens in small moments all day. A coworker asks if you can take on one more task, and you hear yourself say, sure. A friend calls when you're completely drained, and instead of letting it go to voicemail, you answer. Someone asks, are you okay with this? You're not, but you smile and say, yeah, it's fine. Then later, when you're finally alone, something starts bothering you. You're irritated, not necessarily because anyone did something terrible, not because they forced you, not even because they ignored your boundaries. You agreed. That's what makes it so confusing. You said yes, and now you're angry that you said yes. For a long time, it's tempting to explain this by saying, I'm just too nice. Maybe that sounds harmless, even flattering. You're considerate. You care about people. You don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. But sometimes that explanation misses what is actually happening. Maybe you aren't saying yes because you want to be generous. Maybe you're saying yes because you're trying to avoid the emotional cost of saying no. Those are very different things. When someone asks you for something, the request itself may not be the hardest part. The difficult part is everything you imagine happening after your refusal. They might be disappointed. They might think you're selfish. They might become annoyed. They might stop inviting you. They might see you differently. They might ask why. And suddenly, a simple two-letter word feels like a threat to the relationship. This is where human psychology becomes uncomfortable, because people are deeply sensitive to social acceptance and rejection. Belonging isn't some optional feature of human life. Our relationships affect how safe, valued, and connected we feel. So when you imagine another person reacting negatively to you, your mind may treat that possibility as something that needs to be prevented. And now look at what happens in that tiny moment before you answer. Someone asks. You feel tension. Your mind predicts their reaction. You imagine disappointment. You imagine awkwardness. And then you say yes. Instantly, the tension drops. They're happy. The conversation continues. Nothing uncomfortable happens. For a moment, you feel safe again. That relief matters more than it seems, because behaviors that remove discomfort can become easier to repeat. You don't necessarily think, great, I have successfully reinforced my people-pleasing behavior. You simply experience relief. The next time someone asks, the same pattern is already waiting. Request, anxiety, automatic yes, relief, later, frustration. Then the next request arrives, and you do it again. This is one reason knowing that you should say no doesn't always make saying no easier. You may understand the problem perfectly and still repeat it, because the immediate emotional reward of avoiding conflict can be stronger than the delayed cost of overcommitting yourself. The strange part is that the person you're trying so hard not to disappoint may not even be asking for that much. Your coworker might have been completely fine with a no. Your friend might have understood. Your family member might have respected your decision, but you never found out because you were responding not only to what the other person actually said, but to what you predicted they might feel. And that distinction can change everything. There's what actually happens when you say no, and then there is the story your mind creates about what will happen. Those two things are not always the same. Maybe your friend says, no worries, another time. Maybe your coworker says, totally understand. Maybe your family member is disappointed for 5 minutes and then moves on with their day. But if you become accustomed to preventing other people's negative emotions, even ordinary disappointment can feel like an emergency. And that is where saying yes can quietly become a form of emotional avoidance. You're not necessarily avoiding the request. You're avoiding the feeling that might come after refusing it. You don't want to feel guilty. You don't want to feel selfish. You don't want to sit with the silence after saying no. You don't want to wonder whether they are upset. So you solve the discomfort immediately. Yes, I can do that. And the problem disappears. At least for now. Because the cost doesn't disappear. It simply moves somewhere else. It shows up later when you're exhausted and thinking, why did I agree to this? It appears as resentment towards someone who never actually forced you. It appears when you start feeling that everyone takes advantage of you, even though you keep volunteering. And sometimes it creates a particularly painful contradiction. You want people to respect your boundaries, but you keep teaching them that your boundaries are somewhere else. That's not a reason to blame yourself. It's a reason to understand the pattern. Because sometimes resentment isn't evidence that another person crossed your boundary. Sometimes it's evidence that you never communicated the boundary in the first place. Imagine someone keeps asking you for favors. You always agree. Eventually, you become frustrated that they keep asking. From their perspective, they may have learned something very simple. You usually say yes. They may not know that every yes contained an invisible no, that you were tired, that you didn't want to, that you felt guilty, that you were hoping they would somehow notice. But people cannot reliably respect boundaries that were never expressed. And this becomes especially important in adult life because opportunities to say yes are everywhere. At work, it sounds like, can you take this on? In relationships, do you mind if we do this? With friends, can you come tonight? With family, could you help me with something? Online, there are messages, notifications, requests, invitations, and expectations arriving throughout the day. The modern world gives you endless opportunities to respond immediately. And sometimes the most useful thing you can do is nothing, not forever, just for a moment. Instead of answering immediately, you say, let me check my schedule, or let me think about it, or simply, I'll get back to you. That tiny pause matters because it separates a request from the emotional reaction. It gives you enough space to ask a different question. Not, how do I keep this person happy? But, do I actually want to do this? And there's another question that may be even more revealing. If I knew they would be completely okay with my answer, what would I choose? Sometimes the answer is yes. And that's important too. The goal isn't to become someone who always says no. That would simply be another form of reacting. The goal is to make your yes mean something. A genuine yes feels different. You want to help. You have the capacity. The relationship matters to you. The opportunity excites you. You make the choice freely. But a fearful yes has a different feeling underneath it. I don't want to, but I don't want them to be upset. I can't really do this, but I feel guilty. I'd rather stay home, but I'm afraid they'll think I'm boring. I disagree, but I don't want to create tension. The words may sound identical. Sure, but psychologically, they can mean completely different things. And learning to notice that difference is where change begins. Not with becoming tougher, not with becoming selfish, not with suddenly rejecting everyone who asks something from you. It begins with becoming curious about your own reaction. When you feel the urge to immediately say yes, pause. Notice the discomfort. Ask yourself whether you're agreeing because you genuinely want to, or because you're trying to control what another person might feel about your refusal. Then practice with small things. You don't need to start with the hardest relationship in your life. Start somewhere safe. Decline an invitation you genuinely don't want. Tell a coworker you can't take on another task. Ask for time before committing. And then notice what happens. You may discover something surprising. The discomfort arrives. You survive it. The other person is disappointed. You survive that too. They may even forget about it 5 minutes later. And slowly, your mind learns something it couldn't learn while you were constantly saying yes. Someone else's disappointment is not the same thing as rejection. Another person's negative emotion is not automatically your responsibility. And being a good person does not require you to make yourself endlessly available. Eventually, you return to that message on your phone. Can you help me move this weekend? The old version of you might have answered immediately. Yeah, sure. But now you pause. You check your schedule. You notice that familiar pressure in your chest. You recognize the urge to make the discomfort disappear. And instead of obeying it, you ask yourself what you actually want. Maybe you still say yes, but this time it is your yes. Or maybe you finally type 2 letters you've been avoiding for years. No, I can't this weekend. And the world doesn't collapse. The relationship doesn't necessarily end. Nobody comes to take away your worth. There is just a little discomfort, and then it passes. Because perhaps the real choice was never simply between yes and no. It was between being honest about what you want and being afraid of what might happen if you are. And once you understand that, saying no stops looking like rejection. It starts looking like information, a way of telling another person where you end and they begin, because your kindness means more when your yes is a choice, not a reflex.